This is Charter Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance at the California Republican Party Convention in the Bay Area, and we are joined by one of the Bay Area's finest. His name is Tom Del Beccaro. He was chair of the party from 2011 to 2013. He is now a candidate for the United States Senate. Why, oh why, sir, are you running for the U.S. Senate?
Because we need solutions to some of these problems, and that includes cutting the IRS down to size. I'm the only U.S. Senate candidate with a flat tax. I've also provided a comprehensive plan for water in this state and a way to solve our immigration crisis. At the end of the day, we're in what I call the divided era, but we can resolve some of these issues, and that's why I'm running.
Let's talk about the divided era, because here we are at this convention, and for better or for worse, the Republican Party is having some tough times in the state of California. Yeah. In 1999, Republican registration was 35% of the state. Today, it's 27.6% of the state, with no party preference, God, less than 3 points behind. Yeah. What do you do with that as you run for U.S. Senate, even though it's an open primary, but with a Republican next to your name?
So the reason why Republican registration has been falling in the state, quite frankly, is Republicans haven't been offering voters a plausible choice. And that's what it's about. Yes, there's more Democrats in this state, and they will vote for Democrats unless Republicans give them a better reason why to vote. We have some severe problems in this state. We have a water crisis. We have a prosperity issue. And I have a specific flat tax plan, the only one in the country at my level.
But let's talk about the flat tax, because it presents some challenges. Look, when you have a flat tax, it feels good.
No, it results in growth. It's better than feeling good. It's economic growth.
But the question becomes, how then, and maybe I'm answering my own question, how does government incentivize or disincentivize behavior if they can't work through the tax code?
Well, the tax code is one of the biggest influences on behavior. And right now we have a 77,000 page tax code that is an anchor around our economic activity. In the last 7 years, the bottom 90% of America has lost $1,600 a year in income. That's because we have a slow growth economy weighed down by taxes and regulation. So we should get government out of deciding which income is better between what corporation and what other corporation. And we need to get to a neutral flat tax, which will spur growth. You know, we've had 4 major income tax reforms in our history. Every time it was a weak economy, every time they said it would help the rich, but in fact what it did was jumpstart the economy, jobs went up, wages went up, and even tax revenues.
But when you say flat tax, do you literally mean, the tax code will be one sentence?
Rate. Well, no, there's a 15.5% net business income tax rate, which means that you get your net income. You get to take all of your expenses in the year that you do it. No more depreciation schedules. Any small businessman can do his own tax code. In fact, I'm sure Quicken will update their software to say, here's your tax cost for the year. That's how simple it would be. That means that they can concentrate on what they do instead of worrying about the IRS. And for individuals, same 15.5, I get rid of the death tax. And what that'll allow people to do is to not worry and pay accountants.
Well, what about, for example, the government was trying to incentivize homeownership. And how do they do that? They are able to create a tax incentive where you can write off your mortgage interest.
So, what people need to understand is under my tax code, by the way, for individuals, there's no taxable income until a family of 4 gets above $48,000. There's 2 keys to the real estate market. The biggest one, of course, is growing economy. If people's incomes are stagnant, they're worried about the future or falling behind, that kills off the real estate market. So number one, you need strong economic growth. And under my plan, every single individual is better off buying a home than getting the current tax deduction, because my rate even lowers it more than the existing tax deduction, which will result in greater purchasing power. Keep in mind, the average person in a $200,000 mortgage actually doesn't itemize. They just use their standard deduction. So the real estate market is actually being hurt by the current code. I improve it.
What about immigration? Yeah. Your friends in the Senate now on the Republican side, well, actually the Senate was looking at immigration reform in a serious way. It's your friends in the House that were a little nervous and didn't move forward on immigration reform. Where do you go with that?
Right now we're on a path to gridlock. And that's what comprehensive...
We're in gridlock.
Yeah, and that's what comprehensive legislation will do, because there's so many interests. What we need to do is recast this to face the modern reality that immigration is about national security.
But how do you recast this, sir, if I may? When, let's presume, you are in the general election, your opponent, let's just presume, is Democrat Kamala Harris, and the top of the ticket is Donald Trump, who has called for the building of a wall, which I think it's fair to say is not so popular in California. You know, he's called Mexican rapists and murderers, and so, you know, you may have your own position, but the top of your ticket uses language that some see as incendiary.
So, you know, look, we just had the statewide debate, and I talked about my immigration plan and how we're recasting this about national security, and I won the debate. So I think,
and allegedly you did, because look, here it is.
There's
no allegation. What does this say? This is the KCRA debate poll.
Yes.
And it says Del Beccaro gets 38%. Who won? Harris at 33.
And Sanchez far behind, less than half of my support. Look, if you actually provide a proposal to people and you present it in reasonable terms, look, it's no longer just about who's coming across the border to get a job. It's about who's coming across the northern border, who's coming into our ports. And you know what's different in California? San Bernardino. Because after that, people looked at it completely different. We can get immediate visa reform. Stop waiting for comprehensive legislation. Do visa reform. That's a national issue that people can agree to it.
The House? You could probably get it through the Senate. You're not going to be in the House. You're going to be in the Senate.
Republicans need to learn that they can get Americans on their side by engaging them. And the visa issue is on their side. There's no national consensus for visa overstay. There's no visa overstay party. Think about it. So why don't they start with a building block and then they can progress from there, and once they get Americans on their side because they're actually starting to solve problems, it becomes easier. But if you stay over there with your view and they stay over there, immigration is not going to change, and we can't afford to wait any longer because it's a national security problem.
So let's talk about national security, and I think it's fair to say a lot of national security fears come out of the Middle East.
Yes.
And at the top of the ticket, presumably, will be Donald Trump, who has said incendiary things about Muslims. And a lot in the GOP agree with him. 65% say we should temporarily ban Muslims from entering the country, but again, it complicates the conversation.
It does complicate it, which is you can only beat rhetoric with a plan. And what we need to do, this is why I'm suggesting that we go with what I'm talking about, which is to emphasize national security and to emphasize visa reform, because there's a consensus in America on that. But if you demand that everything be solved at once, nothing will be solved at all.
So what about piecemeal? Because there was a sense that maybe in the House, there could be some piecemeal efforts. It could be E-Verify, for example. Ken Calvert, Republican out of Riverside, was looking at that. Is that maybe the approach?
Absolutely, it should be step by step, and start where you have consensus. You know, I'm a small business attorney. I negotiate deals all the time. I don't demand 100% of the negotiations at the start. I also don't start at the hardest point. I start at the point where there's common agreement. America today can agree on national security. They agree on visa reform. The Republicans should put 100% of their efforts. They should put that bill on the desk tomorrow for the president, and then say, if the president won't go along with it, okay, you guys, America, this is our view. The president's against it. Hillary's against it. We're for it. Elect us. This is what you'll get. That's how you win elections, and it's also good policy.
So where do you go from here? How do you spread your message?
Well, there's one more statewide debate to go. Those have been a big boon to us. Our mailers are coming out. I have the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association endorsement. That's the gold standard. Steve Forbes and Tom McClintock. I'm the only one in the Univision debate series.
His name is Tom Del Beccaro, candidate for the U.S. Senate. We're at the California Republican Party Convention. This is Charter Local Edition.